We're learning now Perek Yud Beis, which I think is the Shir of Beizov. Now I want you to know what's flying over here, okay? Perek Yud Beizov is like the home stretch of the Yegeres HaTshuva, like I told you last time. And he explains that tshuva must be done with simcha and betachin, joy that Hashem has forgiven you, and betachin, trust that Hashem forgives you for sure, and the Eibishter is so forgiving that even if you sin 1,000 times, by him it doesn't make any difference. And then the Rebbe asked the kasha. Well, we find that David HaMelech says, a person must always remember that they sinned. So how do you reconcile these 2 points? On the one hand, you say a person must be besimcha and betachin, and Hashem forgives him, and v'chatasi negdi samach. So the Rebbe says that negdi means meirachik dafka. In a remote way, in a far-away type way, you have to visualize that the Aveda is still there, not to forget it altogether, but it shouldn't be the fore of your consciousness, it should be the back of your consciousness. So you should be besimcha b'betachon. And he says, first of all, this remembering Avedis helps for humility. Second of all, it can actually add to simcha. How could Avedis, remembering Avedis, add to simcha? If a person has Yisurim, and he's very upset about the Yisurim, he's wondering why the Eibishter gives him the Yisurim. Remembering all the Vedas helps you deal with the Yisurim that you have. Perek Yud Beis. The Rebbe continues and he talks more about Yisurim. What's there to be happy about? If Chas v'Shalom a person has Yisurim of the body, so the Rebbe answers, it's a goodness which is great and intense, very strong to the soul of the person who is sinning. Why? Because it affects to clean it in this world, and to spirit for being cleansed in Gehenna. And you remember in Perek Av, the Rebbe said something else, that you can avoid the Yisuri Aguf through fasting. So Yisuri Aguf are better than Yisurim in Gehenna, and fasting is better than when the Eibishter gives you Yisurim. Says the Alter Rebbe, especially in our generation, we don't have sufficient power to fast as much as is necessary to the extent that is described in the numbers of fasts. In the Tikkun Tshuva which are written by the Arizal, which are necessary to clean the neshama completely, like as if the person never sinned in the first place, to spare the person from the cleansing in Gehenna. So the person has Yisurim, it takes away the Yisurim of Gehenna. The Ramban writes, the introduction to this commentary in Eiv, that the Gemara says that the Kol Yisuri Eiv, Ayin Shana, doesn't add up to 1 hour of Gehenna. So the Ramban writes in Ekdama to Pirush an Eiv, Shafil Yisurim Shaliyav Ayin Shana. Even 70 years of the Yisurim of Eiv, who had Gefalach Yisurim, sign his finances, sign his children, and sign his own health. Eilam Erech Kal, have no comparison whatsoever. The Yisuri had Nefesh Sha'achas B'Gehenna, to the suffering of the Neshama, even for 1 hour in Gehenna. Because physical fire is only 1/60th of the fire of Gehenna, and as a consequence, the Yisuri Aguf is much less painful than the Yisurim in Gehenna. Of course, you and I can't fathom such a thing, and the Yisurim Gashmi seem very real to us, and the Yisurim again seem very esoteric. But as they stated in Abban, and therefore, Chas v'Shalom, that a person should say, bring on the Yisurim. The Blazah Shimon, the Bein HaKadosh asked for Yisurim, but they were Tanoim. But Chas v'Shalom, when a Yid gives the Yisurim, without asking him, a way a Yid helps himself deal with, and to sort of come to terms with, the Yisurim, the Eibishter gives him to say him that it's sparing him Oynish Shal Gehenna, and they should make your simcha by your person. Ela is only. This world is a world of kindness. In other words, as opposed to the other worlds. Even though it's a world of hell and behester, it's Gvula B'Fil Chasad, like I said in Shari Yeremunah, or Yisurim, Kalam Be'el Mazeh, and relatively speaking, light Yisurim in this world, Nitzul Medinim Kochim Shel Elam Haba, a person is spared hard and severe judgment in Elam Haba. K'mashal, like for example, Hiluch, the movement of, V'ha'atakas Hatzeil, and the transference of shadow, Ba'aretz on this earth. Tefach, when it moves 1 tefach, which is about 4 its boys, that lafi hilagal Hashemesh barakir has to do with the movement of the sphere in which the sun sits in the heavens, alof milim v'choli, thousands of miles, and so forth. Right? If you have a cup and the sun is here, so it creates shadow. And the shadow moves 1 tefach, this much over here, the sun has traveled thousands of miles. Right? Because the sun is so far away, and a small little deviation in the shadow down here, it has to do with a huge deviation in the motion of the sun, Lamaila. This is the motion. Shadow, of course, goes where there's no light. The concealment of the Eibishter is present. The Rebbe, in a number of places, including Tanya Perek Chavav, chapter 26, compares the shadow to the Indian of Gvuras, the Eibishter's judgment. So the judgment of the Eibishter, which is a shadow. One drop of physical Yisurim spares you enormous amounts of the heat of Gehenna. And he continues and he says, Yasal came the Ein Kates, and it's even more so without an end. Hu benimshal the nimshal. Bebchinas hishtal shos ha'elam is in the way, there's a change, the action of the world. Merum ha'mayles, from the highest of levels of Elam Hazar Gashmi down to this physical world. That the Yisurim l'mayla are much more painful than the Yisurim l'mata. Okay, the Mashikos of Bezerah Kodesh is discussed in Zeyah. Me'in yin aliyas ha'elam is as far as the ascent of worlds. The higher world. That of course, when we make a good deed down here, it affects an ascent l'mayla. That all we're offering is one bird. Ben Yaina Itei, which is a young pigeon or a grown chicken. Pigeon. A handful of flour. The same as all physical mitzvahs. And nevertheless, this small act elicits an unbelievable reciprocity, an unbelievable response. Because it says off. The same is true in Yisurim, that the little bit of Yisurim Gashmim are like the shadow that moves, and the heat Lamaila, which has been displaced, is much, 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 much greater. This is another pshat from the Gemara. This Gemara was mentioned in Tanya Sof Perich of Zion. And over there, the Alter Rebbe was talking about a skafia, that when you sanctify yourself about things that are permitted, you can eventually become really, really holy. So he translates, here he brings up a negate to this inyan. Sanctify yourself and be holy. Says the Gemara, Adam, a person, sanctifies himself a little bit down here. He sanctified a lot, above, and so forth. The little bit that we do, the little bit of a scaffold that we have, brings out an enormous amount of kedusha. Was discussed earlier in the Geras HaTshuva and also in the Kuti Amarim Perek Memvav. That when we make ourselves holy for doing mitzvahs, revealing Sevev Kalam. So if we use small acts of mitzvahs, we reveal enormous amounts of godly light. The Kachal Mamish, it's similarly also, and to a greater extent, when it comes to reward and punishment. That the small mitzvah gets an enormous chad, and the small yisurim eliminates a tiny einish. The reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah. What's v'chuli mean? And the schar and aveda is the aveda itself, which is very, very painful. Right? And the yisurim, Gashmim, take away from the schar aveda in an exponential way. The yisurim is relatively speaking insignificant. Says the Alter Rebbe, das lenovin. This is sufficient knowledge for an understanding person, knuckle easy, or masculine, a person who's creative about davar al davar, who wants to know the truth. Yimsa Teiv will find the goodness. Achman Latlan and Yisuri Yaguf. Not Chas v'Shalom, they were asking for Yisuri Yaguf. But when the Yisuri Yaguf come, we say that through the Yisuri Yaguf, you experience that unbelievable Dina Shal Gehim. The Rebbe has a whole Perek base, which continues the discussion that he started in the end of the last chapter. Why you have to remember your Avedas. So first of all, he said because it humbles you, and second of all, it makes you happy. He said himself, these Yisurim are taking away from much, much greater Yisurim in the Elam Avon. And for us, it can be like a little scratch on your hand that hurts for 5 minutes. Spare yourself, you sit again. Okay.